Well, as you see on the screen, I will be talking about the portrayal of the dark world in Tolkien's The Hobbit. But before starting with it, well, I must say, now at the moment I'm writing a PhD based on Tolkien's, on the way in which Tolkien portrayed some natural spaces, more specifically mountains and subterranean or any kind of underground spaces. And why am I saying this? Because up until now, among the things that I've learned, what I clearly see is that Tolkien himself gave a huge importance to nature, as Andoni has mentioned this morning. We can find very extremely great detailed descriptions about many natural landscapes. And well, in my case, I will be studying mountains and subterranean spaces, as I've said. And what it is important about this is that in a way, he gave a kind of personality to those spaces. I mean, characters are not set in concrete, in some spaces just like because he wanted to portray them there, and that's it. No. In a way, and this was mentioned this morning as well, this landscape is in a way influenced by the characters, and characters are at the same time influenced by this, what these natural landscapes in a way demonstrate or show, or as nature itself, okay? So everything that surrounded nature was important for him, and that's why I think, at least, that he gave that importance to the descriptions, okay? But today I'll focus on the way in which he portrayed darkness, especially, okay? And I will do it through the descriptions of some characters, okay? So, well, following this index, I will firstly talk about the feeling of fear. Then I will give you 3 different definitions that gives the Cambridge Dictionary of what a monster should be like. Then I will talk about the portrayal of some characters, as I told you, the good ones, and then more specifically the evil ones, or the ones considered bad. I will lately talk about their fate as evil characters, because it is not the same one as the good ones. And then I will try to summarize everything in just to say what the real role of these characters is in The Hobbit. And then I will finally conclude my presentation. So, in the feeling of fear. Fear is an extremely common feeling, not only in literature, but in a person's everyday life. Fear is usually extremely related to the unknown. Why? Because the unknown means it's something that we are not used to, something unusual for us. We can feel fear, for example, when leaving our country and going to another different one, because we don't know what it is about to come. We don't know the culture, we don't know the people, we don't know how even we will behave in this place. So this may cause fear. But at the same time, fear is extremely related to darkness. Why? Because darkness is a space where we cannot see anything. We cannot see what's beyond, whether there's someone or not. We can start imagining it, and it could be even worse. So the unknown is related to darkness. It is related to fear. So that's why I say that, in a way, fear encourages fear. Okay. What about the definition of a monster? Well, these are some of the descriptions that I found in the dictionary. The first one says, it's an imaginary creature that is large, ugly, and frightening. The second one says, something of unusual size, form, or appearance. And the third one says, it's something, it's a huge and or horrible creature. So what we get from here is that it's something unusual for us. As I told you before, we can be afraid of what it is unusual for us. In this case, it is clear that the image that we get from a monster, it's something that does not fit in the canon of we may consider beautiful. So everything that is outside that does not belong there will be considered as something ugly or disgusting. And even when it is used as an adjective, it is to refer to something huge and often unpleasant. So there's a clear negative connotation towards the word monster itself. Why? What about the portrayal of the characters? Well, there's a clear distinction between the good and the evil ones. But, well, referring again to nature, the general pattern that we say is that good characters, in a way, live in harmony with nature. They all live in quite natural landscapes. And on the other hand, the evil ones behave like if they were against it, they destroy it, they cut up many trees. It's like just the opposite attitude towards nature. So this is the main difference among them. Among the good characters, for example, we have the protagonist, Bilbo Baggins, who lives in the Shire, which is, I think, one of the most natural landscapes. It is all surrounded by well, grass, and it is a very quiet place. It is a kind of paradise for him. It is a very missed place. Well, when he starts the journey, he's all the time remembering how happy he was in the Shire, how he misses it, how he wants to be back. Okay, he does not belong outside. He belongs to the Shire, and it's like his kind of, well, piece of heaven or any kind of idyllic place. Then we have another, maybe more different one, but we have Bart's hometown, that is Lake Town. It may not seem as natural as the Shire, but, well, indeed it is in a way, because well, what we say is that it's a town where the houses, all the houses are made out of wood. It is placed above a huge lake, and they have the Lonely Mountain at the back at the same time. So it is different, but it is also surrounded by nature. And the third case is that of, well, the House of Beorn, which is quite similar to the Shire, maybe, more wild maybe as well. And, well, you may be familiar with this novel, and Beorn lives up in the mountains, quite isolated, and quite in a wild landscape, but at the same time, it is another kind of paradise for him as well. So these characters, which are characterized or same as good ones, live in harmony with nature or surrounded by nature. What about the evil characters? Well, I have differentiated three different groups. The first one is those who live in subterranean spaces, sorry. The second one is about those who live only during dark hours. And the third one is those who hide themselves in dark spaces. So in a way, they have in common that they all belong to the darkness or this dark world. Okay, let's start with the first one, those who live in subterranean spaces. And we have the first case, that of Smaug, of course. Smaug is a huge dragon. And just for the fact of being a dragon, he's supposed to be, well, to be a thief. He must steal jewels or any kind of gold, and he will keep it as long as he lives, which is quite long. And there's well, a moment in the novel in which it is said, there were lots of dragons in the north in those days. There was a most greedy, strong, and wicked worm called Smaug. Well, if you compare the size of a worm with the size of a huge dragon, calling a dragon a worm, you can consider it a kind of insult. So we have the connotation here is clear. It's quite negative, and at the same time, therefore he's an evil creature who lives in a dark space. The second case is that of second example, sorry, is that of the goblins. The goblins appear quite a lot in the novel. They are all the time fighting against the dwarves and against Bilbo, and they appear in the caves and the mountains. They live in this kind of dark holes. And once again, the connotation that we get from the description that we can read in the novel is that they are evil as well, as even when they appear, the weather changes. It says, the goblins gathered again in the valley. Soon, actual darkness was coming into a stormy sky. So it becomes dark and stormy. Once again, we have this kind of negativeness here. And even when they start losing the last fight in the novel, and they start feeling like they need to feel secure, they go back to the deepest holes of the mountain. So they are extremely related to, it is not just a hole in the mountain, it is the deepest hole, like they go far from the outside, like kind of relationship with the underworld, I guess. And the third case is that of Gollum, of course. Well, the first definition that we get from him is that he's a small, slimy creature, as dark as darkness, except for two big round eyes in his thin face. He's also said to have quite large fingers, so he would definitely fit in the description or the definition of monsters that I gave you some slides before. And we know that he lives in a very tight tunnel that seems to be never-ending, where not even goblins dare to go. But I will talk about this later. Okay, let's go with the second group, those who live only during dark hours. And we have the case of the trolls. The description that we get from the trolls is that there were three large peasants sitting around a very large fire. And it is quite interesting what they say about them. There was a fine toothsome smell. They were trolls, obviously trolls, from the great heavy faces of them and their size and their shape of the legs. So just because of their physical appearance, they behave badly. They smell badly as well. And they are huge, of unusual size. Their physical appearance is unusual for us. They are considered as monsters or as evil creatures as well. And, well, you know that, as Andoni mentioned during the morning session, once the sun touches the skin, they turn to stone. So they can only live during dark hours. Here's the relationship with evilness and darkness again. And then we have the third group, those who hide themselves in dark spaces. We have the first case, that of spiders of Mirkwood. What we get from them is that the first time Bilbo starts, Bilbo sees them and starts fighting them, of course. He even refers to them as the thing. It's like they are not even considered to be something that has life. They are the thing. And he says, he could only see the thing's eyes, but he could feel its hairy legs as it struggled its threads round and round him. So they are obviously evil because they are going against the main protagonist in the story. They live in one of the darkest forests that one can find in this novel. And even their voices were considered something disgusting. And as City says, their voices were a sort of thing creaking and hissing. So once again, the image is extremely negative. Then we have the case of Bjorn, which is quite, special. I will talk about him later on as well. What we know about Bjorn is that he's said to be a huge man with a thick black beard and hair and great arms and legs with knotted muscles. He was leaning on a large axe. So he has this image of powerful man. He could in a way be dangerous because he's leaning on an axe. And we also know that he could travel quickly in a bear's shape. So he's a skin changer at the same time. So we have this kind of mysterious character here. And every time he turns into a bear, he hides himself in the woods in order to protect, everything that surrounds his house or what he's about to protect. In this case, Bilbo and the dwarves, of course. And we know that when Gandalf tells Thorin about Bjorn not being that far, as he says, Bjorn is not as far off as you seem to think. Mr. Baggins' eyes are sharper than yours. If you have not seen each night after dark a great bear going along with us or sitting far off in the moon watching our camps. So here we have this figure as well. What about their fate as evil characters? Well, what it seems that the only possible fate for evil creatures here is death. We have the case of Smaug here, this huge and dangerous dragon, who is finally killed by Bard, the man of Lake Town. Then we have the case of the goblins, who are well, constantly being killed during many battles. Even the king of the goblins dies. And then the case of the trolls, as I mentioned before, once the sunshine touches their skin, they turn to stone. And of course, the spiders who are killed by Bilbo and the rest of the dwarves. So it seems that death is their destiny. But there are two exceptions. I've mentioned, or I've been talking about two different characters, and I've said they were evil, but they are not described as evil characters per se. We have the case of Gollum, for example. He's not evil at the beginning, but he has a double personality. His physical appearance is also quite unappealing. So he, at the moment, just for these two things I've mentioned, he could fit in this monster-like description. He also lives in a cave, and as I told you before, where not even the goblins dared to go, as they thought, or they had the feeling that something unpleasant was lurking there, down at the very roots of the mountains, and I'm quoting the novel. So he belongs to the very roots, to the deepest place of the mountain. So we have here, once again, the relationship with the underworld, of course. But at the same time, what happens with Gollum is that he's also given quite a charming personality, where even the reader could feel bad about him, because when, for example, Bilbo finds him and they both start playing riddles, then Tolkien said that riddles were all he could think of. Asking them and guessing them had been the only game he had ever played with all the funny creatures, long, long ago, before he lost all his friends. So he's alone, not even the goblins dared to go and see him there. He's completely abandoned there. So you could, in a way, empathize with him and feel pity. But you all know that he's extremely possessed by the ring at the same time, and this is what makes him behave as an evil character. So, but as in this novel, he's still fighting with himself, with his good and bad side. He does not die in this novel, although you know, how he finally ends in the Lord of the Rings, because he's finally possessed by the ring. It is the ring, the one who wins the battle here. The evil part, or the evil side, is the one who wins in the case of Gollum. What about Beorn? Beorn is, of course, not an evil character either. Well, at least this is what I think. He's Gandalf's friend. He's helping Bilbo and the rest of the dwarves. And but at the same time, as I told you, he's a skin changer, so he could be dangerous. Not even Gandalf, the first time when he starts talking about him to the dwarves, he tells them, okay, he's quite a special man. I will introduce you to Y2, you have to go slowly, try not to annoy them. And then he says, or heaven knows what will happen. Okay, because I'm sorry, I didn't tell you that not even Gandalf dares to say his name at the very beginning. He's all the time telling them, it's somebody, for example. He says, there is somebody I know of who lives not far away. That somebody made the steps of the great rock, the Karok, I believe he calls it. And then Bilbo asks, who calls it? And then he answers back, the somebody is spoke of. He's all the time referring him as the somebody, okay? And then, this is what I've started saying, is that he's all the time warning the hobbits the dwarves to not to annoy him, because he could be dangerous at the same time. And I quote once again, he says, though he is kind enough if humored, still I warn you he gets angry easily. So the conclusion here is that he's a good character, but he could be dangerous. So he's maybe in the middle between good and evil. I don't know. Finally, what is the role of these evil creatures? Well, for me, it is clear. It is that of causing fear, chaos, destruction, damage, everything related to evilness. But at the same time, I see them as a kind of metaphor, A metaphor of what? Of, for example, when for mountain climbers, climbing a mountain it's a very great an experience where they have to be extremely prepared for, and they have to be extremely prepared for it. And they will, of course, find many obstacles on their way. That's why they have to be prepared. If it was something easy, nobody would care about it, but they are in a way attracted to these difficulties they could find in the way. But I can feel it as a metaphor of life itself as well, where you start at the very beginning and, well, you going upwards and upwards, and of course you will find your own obstacles on your way. But, well, as these are obstacles, they are of course negatively described, but I can clearly see a message of hope here, and it's, as I told you before, if the fate of these evil creatures is death, it means that, well, in a way you will overcome, if not all, many of these obstacles, and then, well, you will succeed in your action. So, finally, as a conclusion, I say fear is, well, caused in this novel by these evil creatures and their attitudes, of course. I also see that evilness is extremely related to darkness here, and this is more related to my PhD as well. What I see is that, well, the general pattern is to relate monsters and everything related to evilness with darkness and with subterranean spaces where you cannot see anything. And of course, they are in a way related to the underworld, while, for example, any other landscapes, like in the case of the mountains, everything that goes upwards is more related to sacred, well, actions or characters or whatever. And well, that was all. Thank you very much for your attention.